Oh, it is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for everybody for coming out for the last keynote on the last day. Hopefully you stayed for this, because we are going to talk about some exciting things. We, I think, recognize, if you're here, that AI has tremendous potential. We have here the CEO of Google saying that AI can be more transformative than electricity or even fire. So we get, at a visceral level, that AI might be the most transformative thing that we have seen in our lifetimes. Now, if you look at the data on how AI has actually progressed over time, you'll see some patterns clearly emerge. The data starts back around 2012. I first got started working with AI in 2012, where you had some image classification software that did a pretty good job, and it slowly got better, and eventually it got over that dotted line, which represents the boundaries of typical human capabilities. And then it spread to more and more domains. Now, a few things emerge from a chart like this. We see that the rate of progress is accelerating as time goes by. Things are getting faster and faster at a faster rate. We also see that they're getting better than humans at most everything that AI is undertaking. This is expected to continue. My co-author for the book, Jonathan Brill, is the futurist in residence at Amazon. He has estimated that the output quality of AI models will increase on the order of 30 times between 2025 and 2030. And the cost per computing token will decrease by the order of about 100,000. That is a type of improvement that we are unlikely to ever see again in our lifetimes. There's another thing that emerges from this chart, which is that AI is getting better than humans at almost every endeavor that it's focused on. There is a popular fallacy out there in the media that we have to wait for the moment when AI is going to become as good as humans at most things, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, and then we'll have the singularity and the world will change. But it doesn't work that way. Humans are decent at a lot of things. We had to be, because we had to survive the saber-toothed tigers back 10,000 years ago. AI does not need to be decent at a lot of things. It does not need to survive the saber-toothed tigers. It just needs to be really, really good at the domains that it's focused on. So already we have AI at that level. We don't need to wait for some far-off future. It's now. It's now that AI is at that level. And yet, you're probably thinking, and yet, AI is not perfect. I talked recently with a movie theater chain. They, in their analytics department, decided to do an experiment for their loyal moviegoers, about 1.5 million people in their database. And they wanted to try to recommend, using AI, based on the person's viewing history, what new movies they might want to go see. All right, they were really excited. And so the head of analytics charted this experiment, and he was in that first group. And the second weekend they tried this, he got a recommendation to see a horror movie called Night Swim. He was aghast, and he went to his department on Monday morning, and he said, "Folks, what is going on here? I hate horror movies. I have never seen a horror movie in my whole time at this company. Why on earth is this system recommending a horror movie?" So the team looked at the data about the movie, and they looked about his viewing profile, and they came up with the answer. And they said, "Aha, we've got it. You may hate horror movies, but you have seen 6 movies that feature a swimming pool." And that's AI. AI knows things you don't. This guy did not know he had seen 6 movies that feature a swimming pool, and yet it doesn't inherently know what's important. It didn't know that didn't matter, that people don't see movies based on whether there's a swimming pool in it. And so it's not that it replaces humans, but it has some capabilities that exceed human capabilities. Not all. And maybe it never will. Now, as we've tried to embrace AI, a lot of companies sort of look like this boat, where you have this piling on of pilot projects, and slowly the boats sink under all the weight. The pilots create distraction, and you're not quite sure what you're learning out of them. And they continue forward in this sort of zombie state, not alive, not dead, just sort of halfway there. Seldom are they actually terminated. So we're not really getting anywhere with them. But it goes beyond that. It goes to the value of the projects. J&J did us the favor of actually counting up the pilot projects that they were undertaking. And they counted across their whole enterprise 900. That is almost certainly an undercount, by the way, 900. And then they looked at the value that these projects were creating. And they estimated that only about 15% of them were creating 85% of the value. These were not projects where AI was just sort of painted on top of existing operations. They fundamentally changed how the organization worked. There was a recent Gallup survey that said that 80% of employees and enterprises believe that AI is important to their company's future. And yet only 15% felt that the companies had a clear plan for how they were going to drive value from AI. 80-15, huge gap. And it happens because a lot of people are sprinkling AI like some magic dust on their existing operations. And maybe you get a nice little natural language interface on something, you get a magic wand in the corner of some computer screen, but it doesn't change the way people are working. It doesn't change the way they interrelate to each other. It doesn't change the organization itself. And so the business doesn't change. We need to do better. Now, to start explaining how we do that, we have to go back in time a little bit. Actually, we have to go back, way back. I'm going to take you back 66 million years to the ancient oceans. Back then, creatures like this ruled the seas. They were called ammonites, and they were everywhere. There were over 10,000 species of ammonites. They could range from 3 inches in diameter to 10 feet across. They could be huge. They had evolved these thick shells to withstand the predators of the ancient deep. Think about the gigantic dinosaur fish with their massive, ghastly claws and jaws. And they did pretty well in those environments. Then one day, 66 million years ago, a meteor struck the Earth. It created a humongous cloud of dust that killed off all the dinosaurs pretty much. That dust had sulfur in it. The sulfur led to acid rain. The acid rain made the seas acidic. The acidic seas dissolved the delicate shells of the very young ammonites. And almost immediately, the ammonites went extinct. It was ironic that their fortresses, those shells, became the prison that led to their doom. And that's analogous for a lot of organizations. We create these thick shells, these thick coats of armor against the known predators that are out there. We have pretty good defenses against the threats that we know. And then the meteor strikes, and the world changes, and we're not prepared for it. And those organizations go extinct. So we don't want to be like an ammonite. Now, fortunately, there is a counterexample that occurred at the same time, and that is the octopus. The octopus has basically no natural defenses. It's pretty easy prey for one of those dinosaur fishes. But what an octopus can do is adapt very quickly. All right, I'm going to take you back for a moment. Don't get scared. I'm going to take you back to high school biology class. We are all born with DNA. There's not much we can do about our DNA. It is what it is. Companies, by the way, have their DNA. It's where their factories are. It's the brands that they've cultivated over years or decades. There's not much you can do about that in the short term. It takes a while to resolve. RNA goes between the DNA and the rest of the cells. It tells the rest of the cell what the DNA is instructing. That's how it works in our cells, in an octopus's cell. In an organization, the RNA is the management. It's folks like you who understand the DNA that you're sort of born with, but then you translate that to the rest of the organization, and you give it meaning for how people actually behave. An octopus has a very unique capability to recode its RNA in a matter of hours. You can take an octopus from the Antarctic and put it into the Caribbean, and in a matter of hours, it'll do just fine. So when the meteor struck, this was awesome for the octopus. The meteor wiped out a lot of predators. It wiped out a lot of competitors. Octopuses never had it better. So the octopus has survived and thrived because it has this ability. The octopus is actually 300 million years old. That is 70 million years older than the dinosaurs. It has been around longer than 99.99999% of the species on Earth. Not because of any great natural defense, but because it is adaptable. And that's the lesson of the octopus. We need to have that adaptability. Ideally, we have that over the matter of hours in the case of the octopus, but also very rapidly as well. Here's another trick the octopus can do in terms of using its adaptability. It's a very short video, about 10 seconds. I want you to see if you can spot the octopus. Very simple challenge. Let's see. All right. One of the privileges of my job is I get to watch YouTube and find octopus videos. It's a lot of fun. Anybody spot that octopus before it came out and showed itself? No. The only people who ever say yes are scuba divers. I'm going to show it to you one more time because it's really cool. All right, here we go. An octopus can change its color, its texture, its shape, its movement. It can pretend to be not just a rock, it can pretend to be a piece of seaweed. It can pretend to be a flounder, which is one of its predators. That's how it survives. It can change with the environment super rapidly. That is the tremendous talent of the octopus. So how do you do that as an enterprise? How do you mimic that sort of adaptability? I'm going to take you back one more time, not so far back though. I'm going to take you back about 150 years. So in the 1870s, factories looked like this. They had these hulking masses of steam-powered machinery. And then they had these pipes that went to the steam-powered machinery. In the center of the factory complexes, they had these large furnaces and piles of coal. It was really impressive. Those factories weren't the most efficient places. The steam-powered machinery could be a little temperamental. It was very hot. You couldn't put machines right next to each other. And so electricity came around in the 1880s. And this was just clearly better than steam. It was more reliable. You could put machines next to each other. All that was really nice. And so gradually, it took 20 years, gradually, these factories swapped out the steam-powered machines for the electric machines. And that was nice. That was definitely an improvement. But it didn't really change the way things operated. And it actually took another 15 years for this thing to come around, the assembly line. It was the assembly line that was the great unlock for productivity in organizations. Before the assembly line, a Model T Ford took 12 hours to build. After the assembly line, it was 93 minutes. Before the assembly line, a Model T retailed for $850. After the assembly line, it was $260. And the workers in those factories with the assembly line started getting paid an almost unheard of wage of $5 a day. Everybody won. It was just better all around. You could not have had the assembly line without electricity. It powers the assembly line to begin with, but also you have to space the stations where people work fairly closely. You couldn't make it work without electricity. And yet it took 35 years for people to figure out what electricity enabled. We don't have 35 years with AI. We can't take our time like that. We have to figure out, what does AI enable? We can't think about it as, oh, this is electricity, let's swap our steam-powered machine for electric machine. Yeah, okay, that's great. You get a little bit of a productivity improvement. But it's only through rethinking your system of work, how you do things, who you are as a company, that you get the equivalent of the assembly line. The dialogue around AI today is a lot around the technology and who's best. Is it Chat, or is it Gemini, or is it Claude? And look, all of these platforms are better than they were a year ago. They will be unimaginably better by 2030 than they are today. That's not really the question. That's like saying whose electricity is better. Yeah, okay, it's more reliable, and you want the voltage stable, that's great. But that's not really what's going on here. It's what does it make happen? So my book, AI and the Octopus Organization, is not a technology book, and this is not a technology talk. This is a what does a technology mean for my organization talk, and that is the theme of the book. Because the bottleneck to progress is not the technology, folks. It's us. It's us and how quickly and effectively our organizations can adapt this technology to our contexts. How can we find the opportunities for the assembly line? All right, so you know sort of where you want to go, the direction you want to be. You want to be an octopus. You want the equivalent of rethinking work, but how do you actually get there? Thankfully, the octopus provides us another kind of inspiration. An octopus has what is frankly a really weird biology. It has 9 brains. Each arm has its own brain, and then there's a central brain in the head. And that means that each arm can sort of be doing its own thing. One arm is opening up a clam, another one is exploring a cave, and the central brain is thinking about how do I get away from that shark, all at the same time. And if the shark comes too close, the central brain can override and say, okay, let's get out of here. But there's a nerve ring, too, that connects all of these arms. And that allows there to be contextual awareness about what's going on in the whole organization, if you will. Each arm knows what the other one is doing, even while it can do its own thing. So you have this organism that is capable of massively parallel action, but full contextual awareness. If you think about how that must be to think, it's really alien to us, right? It's a totally different form of consciousness. But it is a wonderful analogy for AI and the way it creates distributed intelligence around an organization. Each arm, if you will, of the organization can be sensing and thinking and acting on its own, and yet knowing what each other is doing. Marketing knows what sales is doing, and operations knows what sales is doing, and it's all united around so that the right information gets to the right person at the right time. This is what AI enables. So you can devolve authority into the arms down to the front line, and you can de-silo your organization by having that information move around that nerve ring. Now, look, we have been talking for 40 years about the need to devolve and de-silo ever since people like Tom Peters with In Search of Excellence back in the 1980s. And yet it hasn't really happened. And that's because the information has not been broadly available. You couldn't fully devolve decisions if the people at the front line didn't have the full context that the central brain did. And if the central brain didn't know exactly what was going on at the front line. That was a dangerous thing to do. AI solves for that. it makes information flow around an organization, including unstructured data. It brings structure to unstructured data. So you have that awareness, and you have the different departments of the organization aware of what else is happening too. So finally you can have that de-siloing that we've said for 40 years is really important, and yet we haven't broadly done. So it revolutionizes how you manage, if you're willing to embrace it, if you're willing to create your own version of the assembly line and not just swap out steam for electric, non-AI for AI sort of enabled. We have companies today that have a head start and are showing us the way. This is a high-frequency trading firm where traders place thousands of trades a second because AI is actually placing the trades. Notice there are humans on this trading floor. It's not like the computers took the humans away. Those humans, I'm betting, are pretty highly compensated, actually. And they are the stewards of the model. They're ensuring that things are working as they're supposed to, that the company is taking the right amount of risks, that's getting the sort of outcomes that were desired, that the model gets new inputs because they know that swimming pools aren't important, but horror movies are. That's the role of the humans. They are the stewards of the model. There's another fallacy out there in the popular media that AI is going to replace human jobs. It's like, if you think about dancing, it's like John Travolta is here and Olivia Newton-John is here and it's Grease and they're sort of dancing and doing their own things. But AI isn't like that. It's tango. It's both partners together. And if you don't have both partners, you don't have the dance. That's how it really works. That's how this high-frequency trading firm really works. And in fact, this is how technological innovations typically work in the economy. Here we have some data out of MIT by David Autor back in 24, where he did an exhaustive study looking at employment in 1940 versus 2018, and where were people employed. Now, okay, there were some professions where there were fewer people, in farming and mining, for instance. And there will be some areas of the economy with AI where there will be fewer people. Call centers. You're probably not going to have as many people in your contact centers. But the net effect here is positive. The dark blue line is the people who went into professions that already existed in 1940, and the light blue is ones that didn't even exist back then. You can see it in some of the job titles that the census created in its periodic updates. Welding machine operator in 1940, airplane designer in 1950, cybersecurity analyst in 2018. These jobs didn't exist beforehand. We have every reason to expect that to continue. Look, we are surrounded, I'm in this room for heaven's sake, with technology. Technology is everywhere in our lives, and yet the unemployment rate is 4%. So it's not that technology has removed all the jobs. It's changed the jobs. It may change your job, but it doesn't remove it. It just requires different sorts of capabilities to engage in that tango, as we probably do every day in our jobs now. We use technology. This is a new technology that we will have to use. So then how does this work within an organization if you start delayering it? Let's look at the impacts on the front lines, the middle management and the senior leaders. And I'm going to start with the front line, because in an Octopus organization, it's at the front line that you have most of that potential for real revolution. If you've been to a doctor in the past 10 years, you probably had a fairly unpleasant experience of you're talking to the doctor, and the doctor is looking at their computer. Type, 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 type. Oh yeah, you have a headache? Type, 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 type. And that's what medicine became since about 2010, where people were tethered to their computer just looking at it. And you know what? Doctors did not go to medical school to learn how to be typists. And yet this is what they were doing. They were typing all the time. Now, with AI, that can change. This is an image of an ambient scribe. An ambient scribe is a program that sits in the background that is listening to the consultation between patient and physician. And it's transcribing everything that's being said, and then it's creating a summary note of what occurred during that encounter. And then it's merging that with the patient's history so that the next physician to see that patient can see a full context about what's going on pretty quickly. This transforms how that encounter takes place. Now the doctor is focused on the patient, not on the computer. They're doing what they went to medical school to do. It is better for patients in terms of the quality of their interactions. It's better for the physicians in terms of their burnout rates and also their job satisfaction. Everybody wins. The patient is better experienced, she gets better medical care, the doctor is happier too. That is the potential of AI, because the doctor shouldn't be typing all the time. He won't be looking through that full patient history, reading all the detailed notes of every encounter that patient had before arriving into his office. There's just not time to do that. And he can't remember everything from that, including sometimes what occurred earlier in that very consultation. Some of these programs will listen in on the consultation and actually ping the doctor before the end. Oh, patient asked about the dosage of her medications in the start of your meeting with her. Do you want to change that? That's great. So it's doing what that doctor shouldn't do, won't do, can't do. That is the potential of AI, at the front line in particular. Now, as we implement AI in that front line, we have to remember a lesson from another place, Navy. In 1900, a battleship captain had a tremendous amount of autonomy. He could get orders from the admiral and go out on the high seas and execute the admiral's intent. And then by 1930, that autonomy had almost entirely vanished. Now, that was due to one form of technological progress. Any guesses on what that might be? Radio, yes. Somebody guessed, and you are correct. It is the radio. Because people could give orders, they did. And that's human nature, folks. People like to think that they know best, and they give orders. You could use AI to get a lot of visibility into what's happening in the front lines of your organization and correct what people do and order them around on everything. You could do that. That is not the spirit of the Octopus organization. An Octopus organization devolves, it doesn't centralize. If you centralize, you are not going to be adaptable like an octopus. You're not going to be fast-moving. And you're not going to survive the meteor strike. You're leading into your ammonite behaviors, not the octopus behaviors. So watch out for this, because it is a universal human tendency we have to be careful about. As you empower that front line, there's one more lesson I want to give you. And it's not from admirals in the Navy, it's from kids on playgrounds. There was a study done a few years ago by a group of landscape architects that looked at how do kids use playgrounds. And they started out, they put a bunch of kids on the playground and had them run around, and there was a big swing set and a slide in the center, and then there was a merry-go-round and some hobby horses on the side. There's no fence. And the kids clustered in the center of the playground. They were all playing around the center of the playground. Okay, that's great. They recorded that, quantified it, cool. Kids go away. The architects changed one thing. They built a fence around the playground. Different group of kids comes and starts playing on the playground. And they're everywhere. They're going up to the edges of the fence. They're really exploring around the whole thing. They're making full use of the territory that was there. And this is because we all have fences implicit in our minds. We always think that there is a fence, and oftentimes we think that fence is a lot closer than it actually is. Ironically, by building the fence, the architects created freedom. And you could do the same in your organizations. By building the fence, you devolve the authority, that's great, but how much authority do I really have? I think the fence is right here. No. You delineate the fence. You be very clear about what is and is not acceptable. And then you can have visibility into what people are doing because AI enables you to do that. So you allow them to use all the territory of the playground. That is the spirit of the Octopus organization. Now they're really taking the full advantage of AI. So at the front line then, think about what people shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be creating Excel spreadsheets for their sales rep every week on what accounts to call on. The reps can do that with AI, and you can have visibility. What won't they do? They won't review the notes of every single meeting that they had with an account beforehand, before they step into that account. And their sales manager probably certainly won't, but AI can do that and summarize it for you. What can't they do? I was talking with a big food company this morning. They are using AI in their performance reviews, listening in on all of the performance reviews and assessing how well they actually reflected the written performance reviews and the 360-degree inputs that people had doing a match. It's just impossible to do without AI. And then finally, think about fences, not orders. If you devolve authority, people need to know where that fence is. But don't order them. Don't use your new equivalent of the radio. Create the fence instead. All right, middle management. What does AI mean for middle management? Typically, this is McKinsey data, in a generic cross industries middle management job, about 75% of the middle manager's time is spent on administration and planning and sitting in on meetings and understanding what's going on, and maybe it's a 60-minute meeting and the middle manager talks for 2 of those minutes. And it's really a waste of the experience and judgment that people in middle management typically have. In an AI-infused organization, it looks very different. You have about 2/3 of the time on the big issues, the big strategic issues, and coaching the employees. So it's not a half-hour one-on-one every other week, maybe, but rather it's much more in depth. Another fallacy that you'll see out there in the media is that AI is the death of middle management. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. AI is a revolution in middle management. It liberates middle managers to have the time to do the things that actually got them into middle management in the first place, to use their experience, to use their judgment, to improve how the front line is operating. That's what AI actually enables people to do. So as we think about how AI can really turbocharge middle management, we should think about how does it help people share knowledge and information so that they can use the judgment that they have. How does it reduce the latent decision time that people have so they can move faster in the spirit of a fast, adaptable Octopus organization? So you don't have to wait 2 weeks for the meeting or get briefed on what happened in some other meeting that you can attend. AI brings that to you, and it resolves issues that could just be hanging there. And then there's this. I was talking recently with a CIO of she had a big organization, about 1,000 people. She's very thoughtful, and she said, you know, I've realized I have hired all these people, all these middle managers in my organization for their technical expertise. And yet everybody has to become a change manager. We have so much change. Everybody needs to be that. It used to be change management was this high priesthood of change management in the C-suite. And okay, they need to change manage too. But because AI is everywhere and affecting everybody's job, everybody becomes a change management manager. And they need the empathy, they need the communication skills in order to make that change happen. All right, senior leaders, I know we have many here. What does this mean for you? 2 questions. How does AI transform what you're really great at as an organization? And then how does it transform the way you organize inside your company itself? So let's use a food example. HelloFresh is the world's largest meal kit delivery company. It's been around 15 years. It has served, just in the United States, over the course of its history, 15% of American households. which is just, when I heard that, that was an astonishing number, but that is the company's data. It creates over 1 billion meals a year. It had a real boom time in the pandemic. This was a great time to be HelloFresh. And then as the pandemic faded, so did HelloFresh's business. And it realized it needed to keep its relevance somehow. And so it thought hard about what advantages it had. Now, it knew that Phil likes to substitute chicken for pork, and I like things a little bit spicy, and it knew how we rated our different meals, but it wasn't using that information. And the thing is, being the world's largest meal kit delivery company, it had more of that data than anybody else. Now, historically, HelloFresh had given people what they called a binder of choices, a really thick list of options to choose from for the month ahead. And that was tedious to go through, and it got, frankly, a little repetitive, because no matter how thick that binder was, it was still sort of a set menu. They really thought about, what does our consumer want? And they realized that they could be the personal chef. They could use the data to have not the binder, but a very tailored set of suggestions just for you on what you like. And you can opt out of it if you want. You can go back to the binder if you wish. But it will give you things that you probably would never think of by yourself, and that it knows are based on things that you like, because AI enables it to do so. So it radically transformed its customer value proposition. But it didn't stop there. The kitchens then had to fundamentally transform as well. These kitchens are typically making 1 million meals a week. They're high volume operations, and now they go from 40 different variants to thousands of variants. So there was a total remaking of operations. And that meant that the production managers' jobs had to change. No longer were they the Excel jockeys figuring out everything that was going to be produced on Tuesday afternoon. No human could possibly do that. AI did that. And the human was the steward of the model. Does the model make sense? Is it producing the right things? What do I know that the model doesn't know? And then how do they communicate that to the people on the kitchen floor who are actually in charge of operations and making this happen? How do they manage the change? So AI was not the innovation. It enabled the innovation. Electricity was not the innovation. It enabled the innovation. Started with the consumer and then worked back into operations and the roles that people had. That's how AI transformation really happens. What does it solve for? For the consumer, for your business partners, for your business itself. Okay, the other question for senior leaders is, how do you organize? The modern org chart is not so modern, actually. It dates from the era of the steam railway. The first org chart was created in 1855 for the New York and Erie Railway. And in those days, things were pretty hierarchical. The telegraphs on a steam railway back in those days worked one way only, which tells you a lot about how those companies functioned. All right, trivia contest. Anybody know who, at the age of 18, created the duplex telegraph? It was his first major innovation? No, but you're not far off. Thomas Edison. Good on Tom to figure that one out. But while the communication finally could go two ways, a lot of org charts were still basically like this. It was the very traditional way of doing business. Top down. The thing is, work doesn't actually happen this way anymore in organizations. It occurs across. It doesn't occur in pyramid 1, they make a decision, it goes to pyramid 2, and they go execute. No, it doesn't work like that. Work occurs across. So we have to think about, how does work actually occur? Not what does the org chart say, because that is a lie. Our organization in reality doesn't function like this. So earlier book of mine was called Jobs to be Done, and that was about how do you understand consumer motivations, the fundamental motivations they have. Not what are they buying today, you have that data already, but what fundamentally motivates why they do what they do. You can deploy that not only on consumers, but in your own company too. What is the fundamental work that has to get done? Not what are the tasks that people do today. You can get to that later. What fundamentally has to get done? And then can you deconstruct that into its individual units? Where does the information have to come from? Who has to do something with the outputs? Who has to be at the table making decisions? As you do that, you could start thinking in a very granular way, how do I thread AI through my organization? How do I really remake the way this stuff gets done? Now, you cannot do this for all work all at once throughout the organization. You will die. The organization needs a degree of predictability on how things work. You can do this maybe for a half dozen work processes at a time. So prioritize. But go through and really start at first principles, not painting AI on top, not swapping your steam-powered machine for an electric machine, but really rethinking the process. That's how fundamental change happens in an organization. So for senior leaders, you want to rethink your business, and then you want to map the work. We have our research in much more detail in the book, AI in the Octopus Organization. If you scan this QR code, I urge you to do so. That is a free e-publication of the book. You can read it on Kindle or other EPUB readers. And it has a lot of the background data, the research, and things that we haven't had the ability to go into in this talk, but I think will take you further in getting this really applied in your companies. So much of the dialogue around AI is about making things cheaper, replacing headcount. And there's a lot of scare around that, and I guess appropriately, although I have very seldom seen any organization have massive headcount reductions enabled by AI. It doesn't work that way. It augments, it doesn't replace. There's been far less dialogue about how it enables organizations to be faster and better at what they do. And that is actually the real promise of AI. That's what enables you to be great with AI. Not so much by reducing costs, maybe a little bit, but really by becoming faster and better. So I urge you to be like an octopus, to champion adaptation in your organizations, because this is the meteor strike. This is the moment when our economies, our industries, our lives change. It is the biggest transformation of our lifetimes, bigger maybe than electricity or fire. And so we have to be the ones championing that, not being the ammonites, but being the adaptable octopuses. We have to reimagine what is possible in our industries, in our own workflows, in our enterprises. And more than anything else, don't fall for the trap of thinking this is about the technology. It's not about the technology. It's not about the AI. It's about the people, and the people like you who will influence them and make the big change possible. Thanks. Happy to take questions.